Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? Good, thanks for being here. We're really excited to be part of this week, which has been awesome so far. We've got a rock star panel here for you today. The title of today's panel is What It Takes to Be a Startup Founder. And with that in mind, I wanted to pose a question to the audience to begin. I guess, how many of you in the audience, with a show of hands, are either an entrepreneur or aspire to be an entrepreneur? Awesome. Well, that's great to see, because I think these panelists are going to share a lot from their own experience. I think you're going to be able to take their insight and hopefully use it in your own business, in your own experience as an entrepreneur. I come to this panel today with a lot of humility, because I am not a startup founder. My name's Nathan Rubbelke. I'm the editor of St. Louis Inno. And St. Louis Inno is a publication of the St. Louis Business Journal. It focuses on all things technology, entrepreneurship, startups, and innovation. But through that job, I get a chance on a daily basis to talk to business owners, and that's how I met all three of these, through stories I've written about them, and get to hear their insights about what it takes to run their businesses, both the good and the bad. And so when we were asked to put together an event for Startup Week, it was an easy idea to say, let's get together some entrepreneurs, and let's talk about the shared challenges and opportunities they have. And so that's going to be the focus of our conversation today. And like I said, I think you guys are going to get a lot of insight from these three entrepreneurs up here about how to run your business and how you can be a better entrepreneur. So with that, I've introduced myself. Let's give a chance to hear from our awesome rockstar panelists. I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about the businesses they run and they own. Allison, you want to get us started?
Sure. Can you hear me? I don't know.
Yeah, if you hold it up.
Okay. Is this better? Yes. So my name is Allison Cousins, and I'm the founder, one of the co-founders of Approach Dating. Approach is a dating app designed to facilitate in-person connections over shared interests. Hi, how are you? The way we are different from other dating apps is that we connect people at the places where they're going to have a first date. Okay, so those are partner businesses, bars, restaurants, coffee shops, and then in addition to that, we connect people while they're attending large-scale events. So you might be at a baseball game, so you already like baseball. You would be able to connect with anybody else in the stadium who's also single on our app and shares that interest of baseball. So I'm a new founder. We founded back in 2020, but I've recently made the transition to working on Approach full-time, and learned a lot along the way, have gone through a lot of the I-10 investor readiness programs throughout my journey, and feel like we're really poised to scale outside of St. Louis and beyond. So I'll stop there with my introduction.
Before we get to Dan, I forgot to make an important announcement before we started. There is pizza on the way, and it should be here soon, so I wanted to make sure I got that out before we get to Dan.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Dan Davis, a co-founder and CEO of Arcadian Infracom. We are a fiber infrastructure company. What does that mean? So when I explain to my 10-year-old son what I do, I build the internet. This is what I've been doing for 30 years. So Arcadian builds long-haul fiber between major cities to connect hyperscaler data centers. So we build the fiber that is literally the global backbone. So this is my second startup doing that. I started the first one in the 90s, sold it to a telecom company, spent 15 years there, scaled them out globally, tried to retire in 2017, utter failure at that, as you can see, because I'm back here again doing it again. So we're a bit different. There's a lot of great B2B SaaS companies here. We're kind of the other end of the scale. We're the physical infrastructure that is the internet that everything else rides on. So we're a bit different. St. Louis is our headquarters. Maybe about a third of the people will be here. The other 2/3 are literally coast to coast. So I bring a perspective of having done this, going from startup to global to sell it to back to startup again, and kind of cycle through it once more. So look forward to sharing what I can that's helpful for you today. I can bring a lot of different perspectives. I'm a recovering engineer, recovering lawyer, recovering corporate finance MBA. So look forward to questions and interacting as we move through the day.
Hi, my name is Sophie. I own a business called Expedition Sub-Sahara. We're a home decor company that specializes in handcrafted African goods. I'm originally from Senegal, West Africa, and when I first came to the States, I was really surprised that the only story of Africa that Americans know is the one of poverty. So I built a business on a mission to change the way African products are bought, sold, and talked about. Our business is centered in Senegal, where I have 10 farmers, 120 weavers, and the entire production is in a small village where our business is the infrastructure of that village. And then we sell 100% online. I started this business 5 years ago on a mission and had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I thought, hey, I'm just gonna show people these really beautiful things and they're gonna buy them. That's not how it works. So I've failed and succeeded and failed and succeeded and failed and succeeded over the last 5 years, more times than I can really say. But I've learned a lot and I'm excited to be here and share what I've learned.
Awesome. Thanks for introducing yourself. I want to get to you all three. The reason I picked you for this panel, you all have a three very varied paths to entrepreneurship and where you are today. Sophie, I know you had a business before, and then you jumped into this, like you said, kind of didn't know what you might be getting into. Dan, like you said, you went from startup to corporate, back to startup. Allison, you were a teacher before you made the leap into entrepreneurship. I guess I'm curious. I mean, you all had things, you were in good places, good careers. Why make the decision to be a business owner? It's so risky, it's so hard. It's fun, but it's hard. I guess, what was the thought process when you made that decision, and just how did you get started with your current ventures?
So my thought process, so before this, I was actually a wedding photographer. I shot Indian weddings. If you've ever been to an Indian wedding, it's a 3 to 5 day party. It is incredible, actually. Like, we should all go to an Indian wedding. But I started so when I first came to the States, I was very, very small. I was an athlete, and then I gained a lot of weight when I came here. And after college, I decided I wanted to lose that weight, so I started powerlifting as a hobby. So I powerlifted, and I started competing, and I actually hurt my back trying to PR on my squat. And I actually fragmented my spine to the point where I couldn't feel my legs anymore. So I was bedbound, and I couldn't do anything. And in that moment, I thought about my life, and in those months, I thought about what I wanted to do. I came to the United States because of education. My mom, once she got a divorce from my dad, didn't have anything because of the structure of society back home. So I came here because she said, you will never depend on a man for anything, right? So she gave me that gift. And I was living my life, right, as a really successful wedding photographer, but I wasn't doing anything that was bettering people back home. I wasn't doing anything that was really feeding my soul in a way that made me sing, and I wanted to do something that really changed the lives of people back home. So that was my driving mission. I also saw this other aspect where, all of my American friends, the questions they asked about Africa, about Senegal, were so rooted in poverty. It was always, always, always about, did you guys live in huts? Did you wear shoes? Did you do this? Did you do that? Now, I am a lion, don't get me wrong, but we didn't really play with lions, right? So there was this gap in the market, in my opinion, of educating without judgment, because we only know what we're taught, right? Educating and saying that, these products, this basket, these wooden goods, these really beautiful products were made not only by a person who, needs to be helped, but were made because of a culture that is so beautiful. Now let us show you the beauty of this culture through this product. And Americans really received our product really well. They're colorful, they're beautiful, but they also love the respect aspect of it, getting to know the crafter, because that's a story they hadn't heard yet. So that was my driving force, and I think I went away from the question a little bit.
No, I think you answered it perfectly.
Okay, perfect.
Sure. So my journey started just like anybody else's. I identified a problem. So I got divorced back in 2019, and I started online dating, and I was like, this is awful. And a lot of people agreed with me. I did a lot of research. 72% of online daters report feeling hopeless about their dating futures, right? So I was not alone in that, and started investigating what's wrong, and why is there not something better? And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I started diving into that because I'm a solution-oriented person, and I'm like, well, if somebody's not going to make it, then I'm going to, because I have this great idea and I'm going to just figure it out. And I think that's the mindset of a lot of entrepreneurs is I'm going to figure it out, because we're going to run into a million roadblocks along the way, but we chose to be entrepreneurs because we're problem solvers. And that's how it starts, and that's how the journey continues, on a daily basis, every time you hit an obstacle. That's part of the fun of it, the journey of it. I was going to add another piece of that.
Can I follow up on that real
Sure.
quick? I'm curious for you. You identify this problem. When do you decide to jump head into it? I mean, because it just you're seeing a problem, but it's easy to say, well, maybe someone else can do that.
Yeah.
So there's already a lot of dating apps out there. When do you decide, you know what, let's go for it?
It's a very saturated market. It is, and our vision for the way that we engage people to interact might not be the perfect fit for everyone. But at the end of the day, most people that use dating apps use 2 to 3, so we could be a new solution for people that have not even identified that as a problem yet. The next thing I did was look at, is this part of who I am at the core? What I envision myself as a person is a connector. And this concept allows people to connect in meaningful ways, right? Over shared interests. Maybe they're not finding their life partner at this date or at the Cardinals game or whatever, but they're connecting authentically in a genuine way with somebody new. And at the end of the day, connectiveness is the #1 indicator of lifelong longevity. And so, at the core of who I am, I want to make connections for people. I want to be connected to people. And so this mission of approach is doing something that is true to my heart. And I made the jump softly.
Okay.
The idea came in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic in March. I was a teacher and the timing was right. I was teaching PE virtually. My school had shifted to a optional model, so I was getting my favorite students in a Zoom room and we were doing jumping jacks in our living rooms. And because of the timing of my life and the situation of my workload, I had the opportunity to investigate all of the answers to these questions, right? I started talking to everybody that I was interacting with through the online dating landscape. Are you having this problem too? And does this seem like a solution that would be viable? And was able to collect a lot of data, and that then led me to my next step. Okay, so what's our next step? We are gonna get a product that actually people can give us feedback around. We're gonna get an interactive tool. Somebody can interact with this and say, the user experience isn't right, which led us to the next part of iterating and then finding developers. And so I didn't actually make the jump to go full in until this past summer, when it was right for my personal life, my finances. I was able to make that decision. But every step along the way is testing, is a continual test of how credible, how validated this idea is, and just the traction that we get along the way was what made me make the final jump.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's really useful advice, or the story you just told. I guess, Dan, you said you failed at retirement. How does that happen? And I guess, one, why go back? I guess, what caused you to go back? And then I guess, what lessons are you taking from the first startup here as you build the second one?
Yeah, so built the first company I was employee number 10, built it up, sold it to a company called CenturyLink, which is a telecom company. It was about 5,000, 6,000 people, 1.9 billion in revenue, which seemed large at that time. Was going to stay 12 or 18 months to make sure once we sold, all the people got transitioned. I woke up 15 years later, I'm still there. At that point, I had been deputy general counsel. I had run the network globally. My final position there is VP of global strategy, global corporate strategy. I was traveling the planet 70% of my time. I also had children at that point, 1 and 3 years old. Put those numbers together and that's not a stable combination, having 1 and 3-year-old children and traveling 70% of the time, if you want to keep your children and stay married, which I did. So I pulled the ripcord out of corporate America and did consulting for a while, which was fine. I would, again, travel the planet doing due diligence for people wanting to buy fiber networks in Brazil or data centers in Europe. And the opportunity really kind of found me. I say it found me, but then I was also open to seeing it. So in that consulting firm, we had a nonprofit arm. It's a very small consulting firm, 10, 12 people, industry veterans like myself, kind of refugees from telecom that do consulting. We had a nonprofit arm that that wanted to help solve the tribal broadband problem. Because remember, I'm in communications infrastructure. And so we had an effort to try to help tribal America, rural America solve their broadband problem. In that consulting firm, I worked with a gentleman who is ultimately a co-founder of Arcadian, came to me and said, look, a buddy of mine who used to work for the Navajo Nation, which is in southwestern US, wants to put a data center in Navajo Nation and try to improve economic development in Navajo Nation. Navajo Nation, 24,000 square miles. It is the physically largest tribe. There are 575 tribes in the United States. They're independent sovereign entities. It's a big tribe, 180, 200,000. However, it's desperately poor, I would say, is probably they're underdeveloped economically, to say the least. 30% of the homes don't have electricity, 40% don't have water. Average annual income pre-COVID is under 11,000 per household. So to say that they don't have a lot of economic activity going on is an understatement. I said, okay, can we put the idea is we've got a coal-fired power plant, Navajo generating station, 2.2 gigawatt coal-fired power plant, created most of the electricity for Vegas for 30, 40 years. It was shutting down. My co-founder, who knows data centers like I know fiber, said, hey, can we turn this into a data center? Because data centers need lots of electricity. It's a power plant, has big power lines coming into it, which is one of the harder things, infrastructure to build. I said, fine, let's take a look at this as an opportunity. He was semi-retired as well. And I said, looked at it overnight, came back. I said, well, you've got a great idea for a warehouse. He said, what are you talking about, a warehouse? We're talking data centers. I said, look, there's no fiber within 200 miles of where you want to put this data center. And a data center without a fiber connection is called a warehouse. And he asked the very insightful question. He said, well, don't you know how to build fiber? Of course I do. That's what I've been doing for 30 years. That's actually how Arcadian was born. So we got a deal done with Navajo Nation to build through the Navajo Nation where no one's ever been able to build before. Navajo Nation is just north of Phoenix. So I tried to build through Navajo Nation 25 years ago. They said, sure, you can build here. It's $1 million a mile to use our land. Not surprisingly, that business case didn't work, and so nothing got built. So when they came back to us and said, look, we want to put a data center here, I said, we need to build fiber to put the data center. I said, well, we're going to have to work something out. And they said, sure, let's sit down. And so we, very secretly talked with them 8, 9 months, got the deal done, and that's how Arcadian was born. So it's a matter of, you could say right time, right place, right attitude, knowing enough about your business of where an opportunity is, because we went from turning a power plant into a data center to building long-haul fiber for the hyperscale companies. So it's really just keeping your eyes open and your mind open to what an opportunity could be. Personally, for me, it was pretty clear consulting was not, I'm a pretty driven person, as probably most of the people here are. That pace wasn't enough for me, so it was a combination of, personally, I knew I didn't want to be done. I had young children. I wanted to show what it means to work hard. What we undertook checks that and then some, because what we do is extremely hard, building 700 miles, 1,500 miles of fiber at a time. But it's also, it was very personal to me. It is something that is a rare combination of a match of my skill set and a purpose I could care about. As we're building long-haul fiber from Salt Lake to Phoenix, our customers are the biggest companies on the planet. That's not hyperbole. It's Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google. Our financing party is right now TIAA CREF, one of the bigger investors on the planet. But then at the other end of the scale, when you go to Navajo Nation or you go to rural America and you see just the desperate level of lack of economic opportunity, what we realized is we could route our long-haul fiber through these rural communities and tribal communities, and then bring the backbone literally through their backyard, and then use that long-haul fiber to improve broadband, which is, as we know, the basis of all the digital economy. So that purpose, so it's a strange combination of the thing I know how to do suddenly became relevant again, and we had a purpose that I could really care about. It's a long answer to a short question.
No, but that gets at what I want to ask about next, because what I can tell from all three of your answers is there's purpose behind what you guys are doing. Very personal purpose, it sounds like. And I guess, how do you balance this purpose that I think Sophie talked about, kind of feeding your soul, what you're doing with your current company? I guess, how do you balance that with sort of also the responsibility, especially if you take on investor capital, to have financial results? Yeah. And no one gets in this, no one becomes an entrepreneur to lose money, Right. So how do you balance sort of purpose with also success? They probably, like you were saying, Dan, they kind of feed it into each other, but at times they probably can contradict. Yeah. Maybe. How do you balance just those two components?
So we got a strange combination of events either happened or we created them, doesn't matter, where this purpose of solving rural and tribal broadband, actually that story, that mission, that purpose solves our hardest business problem. For me to build a Salt Lake to Phoenix, 700 miles, 74 different permitting agencies to work with. So it took roughly 3 years working through 73 different permitting processes. Almost all these are public agencies. So how do you move, for those of you who work with the government, how do you get the government to move at the speed of private enterprise, right?
Hard.
It is hard. This is sales 101. You're a county supervisor. You're governor of a tribe. There are governors that really aren't chiefs, but president of a tribe. I need to get you to do something. I can't just write checks because you're a governmental agency. That's called graft and corruption, and you go to jail. So you can't use that, right? So how do I get you to yes? This is sales 101. I got to find something that you care about. If you're a governor of a state or a U.S. senator, in the midst of COVID, everybody realized the rural broadband problem is a real problem. It's a political problem. It's an economic development problem. And it's not Springfield, Missouri. The problem starts in St. Peter's and goes all the way to the outer ring suburb of Kansas City and everything in between. So this story of solving rural broadband now is something that solves a problem that you have, right? This is sales 101. So this purpose that we have of solving rural broadband solves my hardest problem, which is getting public rights-of-way holders excited about what I do, not just tolerate what I do, which is digging ditches and putting fiber and plastic in the ground. To us, it's this fascinating interweaving of our purpose actually solves our core hardest business problem. So for us, that's what it is.
It's fascinating.
So this is a hard question for me because when I walk into a room, I've only walked into a room looking for investment a couple of times. And every time, the margins of my business is the topic at hand because I employ 140 people back home. And the continent, not just Senegal, not my country, but the continent of Africa has the most nonprofits of any other continent. Yet, it has almost zero industry, I'll say in Senegal, there is almost zero industry. I'm a huge believer in capitalism for good. I'm a huge believer in that because people don't really need a handout. They just need work. They just need opportunity, right? So for me, going into my country and saying, how can I retell our story? Not in a way that is just radically respectful, because that's just baseline, right? We're gonna tell the story. I'm gonna tell the story of my mother and my grandmother in a way that is radically respectful, as you would your mother and your grandmother, right? But also not do it in a way that strips and continues to strip the land in which these goods are being made. What that does is it dwindles my margins. It means that I am paying people not fairly, not a living wage, 10 times a living wage, because that's actually what is livable in that country. That dwindles my margins. That means I'm going to pay my warehouse staff here not fairly, but what they deserve. That dwindles my margins. The human capital is huge on my business. And when I walk into a room of investors, they look at those numbers and they say, how can I get a return on this? And the simple fact is, I have no idea, right? But I know that I'm building something that means so much to so many people. And I know that we have been profitable since day one without any outside investment. So I don't know. But I know that it's possible to build a successful business without necessarily taking on outside investment. Now, getting to 1 to 1 million, 1 to 2 million, you might be able to do that. Getting to 100 million, you definitely need gas on that. In that, you need gas, right? I don't know how to get there because that is my problem right now. How do I keep this really beautiful thing that I've created that puts humans first and still continue growing it in a way that is sustainable? Because at some point, if you take on outside investment, what I've learned is it's not, these people giving you money. Yeah, they believe in the mission, they believe in the product, they believe in you, but they worked really hard for that money and they need a return on their investment. And how do I then give them a return without doing what has always been done in my country, without stripping the human capital? So I don't know. I guess we'll figure it out.
So I think for us, we're much younger in our journey of startup than both of you. We're not able to live out our purpose without our product. And, our product is what connects people, how they connect in person. We drive the economy through them visiting, places where you'd go on a first date. We're encouraging people to go live out experiences of things that they enjoy doing and hoping to organically connect, serving as a tool to organically connect with those people that have those same passions and interests. And for a young startup like us, funding looks like a lot of different things right now. We bootstrapped for a little while. We raised a very small round of friends and family. We took out a very small loan because we just needed to extend our runway. And we're really in a position right now where we're poised to get in front of angel investors and potentially VCs so that we can really perfect that product. That what we have done so far has allowed us to get an MVP in the market, to get that data, that traction, and poise us to say, hey, all right, we're ready now. This is what we've learned, and we're ready to take that next step.
Mm-hmm. Sophie and Allison, you both talked about investment and growing the company. When you guys are out there, obviously, Sophie's talked about the margins and investors looking at certain things in your business, but what are you looking for in investors as you go grow the business? Now, obviously, you need the capital, but what else do you want from them, and what type of investors attract you?
I'll go first. I think right now we're looking for angel investors who have a passion for our mission. We understand that it is a saturated market, but we also understand that we have a really novel idea and a new approach to doing that that's more innovative, and it combines creates a new user experience. And so for us, it's really true alignment. Until we scale out of St. Louis, we were probably not poised to get big VC money until we have that traction, and we have, it's really just the numbers, right? We need users, we need downloads, we need all that. And so right now I think our best path forward is getting in front of angel investors with the right pillar alignments that believe in the product.
Mm-hmm.
I 100% agree. I think alignment is first and foremost. I think also being okay with how far we've come bootstrapped and completely bootstrapped, not even a bank loan, just completely bootstrapped, and saying to an investor, most of these investors are people who have built huge businesses. The amount of knowledge that they can just give you, just being your partner, it's huge, right? So being able to fully tell our story in a way that isn't just, I think a lot, for us personally, I think a lot of it is people can't see outside of Africa and see that we're building a global home decor company, first and foremost. I won't say everybody has a home because that's an untrue statement, but you know, what we build, what we're creating are things that people use every single day, you know? And the artisan sector is one that is so underserved by big business because it's considered these mom and pop, like farmers markets. It hasn't been, there's no infrastructure within that sector. And we can create something so, and I think being able to really tell my story in a way that is attractive to an investor and being able to align myself with investors who see a mission bigger and see a longer term mission is where we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I'm curious to shift gears a little bit. You guys have talked a lot about your experience so far, and you talked about some of the challenges that you have as entrepreneurs. I guess how do you balance the personal side of it? This is hard work. It demands a lot of you. How do you balance building a business, something you care so much about, as we talked about, but then there's friends and family and things you care about. How do you balance it too? Because I'm guessing the responsibilities you have and the demands you feel are probably more than the rank and file worker.
I'll let you go.
You're not going to have day-to-day balance, just admit that, right? So I really look at it, month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year. You got to back up enough. Otherwise, if you try to measure balance on a weekly basis, you're going to fail every time. And so it's how you define balance,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you back up enough and say, look, I didn't get to this play for my son or daughter. You got to realize those are some of the things that you're not going to be able to do. You can't do it all. And if you can't really internalize that truth, you're constantly going to judge yourself a failure at it. So it's think about balance over longer periods of time. Forgive yourself for the little things that you're not going to be able to do because you're going to have to make those compromises. The other side of it is have that support system around you. For me, I work outside the home. I have a spouse who takes care of things at home, so we're fairly traditional in that sense. That works for me and us. If you're seeing, once you throw kids in the mix, it gets a lot more complex because they're a little less understanding and forgiving. But you try to have that conversation of, showing them when the balance is, and when you just got to learn to forgive yourself for the shortcomings where things are feeling very unbalanced, because you will have those times. That's my best advice. Forgive yourself now for the things you're going to do wrong in balance, and just move on and do the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
I have zero balance in my life. 100% of my energy goes to my business. I don't know how to answer this question because I'm not very good at balance. I am foreign, which is actually quite helpful because most of my family isn't here, so I don't have to worry about family as much. And my friends have gotten so used to me putting my business first that I think, honestly, I have the best friends. They're my biggest support system, and they're just like, yeah, go, do your thing. So the only thing that I will say, I have one non-negotiable, and that's the gym. I go to the gym every morning from 6 to 8. Sometimes I go and I lift. Sometimes I go and I talk to the guy in the front desk. But I go. And it's a non-negotiable. It's good for my mental health. It gets me, I can stay physically strong. I realize that if I don't go to the gym, I am not coming to work as my best self, and I'm not coming to the world as my best self. It just regulates me in a way that I didn't think anything really could or would. But I have no balance. I am the worst person. I focus on my business hardcore all of the time. I don't take days off. I am the unhealthy version of work and no life balance.
For me, it's just building a system and routine and priority. You know, similar to you, I have to go to the gym, I have to eat somewhat healthy, and I am divorced and I have 2 kids, so you know, my Wednesdays and Thursdays are non-negotiables. Well, we've also identified that our singles nights, our best attendance is on a Thursday night, and so now, you know, once a month I'm attending a singles night on Thursday, and that's a sacrifice that I make, but I make it up to them some other way. And again, it comes down to balance and giving yourself the okay to make those sacrifices, because you know your kids see you working hard and they see the sacrifices that you make for them, and you're also a model, you know, so they grow up seeing that, and nobody's perfect either. And so I look at it in that way, because otherwise you could just dig yourself into a real deep hole if you don't. But it does come back to, you know, busy seasons of life. The first things that go are exercise, sleep, and nutrition. And the first thing you have to be able to refocus on are those, because without those, you're not going to focus, you're not going to be your best self and your highest producing.
I appreciate y'all sharing that, how you guys navigate that. I do want to leave some time here for audience questions, if anyone has some. I'm going to ask one more question here of these panelists, and then we'll get to any audience questions. Awesome, thank you. I guess before we get to the audience, I guess, does any of you 3, you know, you talk about entrepreneurship, and it's easy, and as you should, celebrate the wins. You know, the funding rounds and the exits and the big customers and signing on customers, but it's also really hard work, as we've discussed here. And Sophie, you talked about earlier about success and failure, and then success and then failure. I guess, are any of you, you know, open to sharing a moment of failure or on the brink of failure, and sort of how you navigated it and how you got back to that point of success?
Anybody have one top of mind?
When we were preparing for this, I shared, you know, once or twice a year during this whole thing, you know, I'll go downstairs and, you know, talk to my spouse, and you're at that depth, you're like, I don't know how we're going to get out of this, You know, and your spouse is like, you've gotten through this before, you'll figure this out. You fight about it, no, this is it, you know, we're not going to be able to get out of there. And for me, it's a cycle I go through, and he and I both know that when I wake up the next morning, that's all going to be in the past. But that doesn't mean you don't let yourself feel it and move through that, and you know, and go through that depth, because you will come out the other side. That's my best advice, is like, just embrace it. When you're feeling that way, don't fight it. You know, you're going to go through those days where you're just not quite, you don't know how you're going to figure it out. But after 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times and coming out the other side, you build this confidence that you will figure it out. For me, I'm an engineer primarily by training, on top of some other things, but I'm a very visual thinker. For me, it's a matter of backing up, and I know I've figured out that now we are at the point in our development, and maybe even early on, where there's puzzle pieces all over the table. The answer is out there. If you start with a positive attitude, the answer's there. My challenge is to find it. But you've got to believe the answer is there, and if you walk in with that perspective, you'll figure out the answer, how to get past whatever's in front of you. But if you walk in with a negative attitude, I can't do this, then you're going to end up in a different place. It doesn't mean you don't go through the hard times and you don't wonder how you're going to figure it out, but at core, for me, I just visualize like somewhere out there, the puzzle pieces to put together to get past this are there. And that positive attitude, and then reaching out and letting people know, hey, I need help, I'm stuck here. I've got a lot of formal and informal advisors, and they know when I call them, like, hey, I'm stuck, I can't figure this out. There's a lot of people, you know, I'm sure in your family, in this community, that's a great thing about the startup community here. Reach out to one of us. If nothing else, just for emotional support, or you might know that person that knows that person that's going to put the puzzle piece on the table for you. But it's really a community effort. So.
One moment particularly stands out. A while back, we got a meeting with one of the early founders of Match.com. So I'm going into this meeting with, like, this is the big pitch. You know, he is also previously invested in Coffee Meets Bagel, which is another dating app. And I was like, just so excited, over-prepared, ready to go, and take the meeting. He's in a hotel room. I could tell from the very beginning of the meeting that he really didn't have much time and was kind of distracted. And so started the pitch and tried to, like make it quick, but also succinct. And he interrupted us almost on every slide. And so I was kind of like, well, who's giving the pitch here, me or you, And so we get, not even to the end. And he was just like, look, you can't have the same business model as all the other dating apps, right? Users are subscribed to be members or whatever it is, the same shit. And we were like, ooh, that hurts, right? Like, everybody else has the same model, and we created the same thing. And though our user experience is different, the business model is the same. And we were just like broken, right? We thought we had a sure investor here, and it took a while. It hurt real bad. But we went back to the drawing board, and we created a different way that we are going to get revenue from the businesses and these venues. And these users can purchase coupons similar to Groupon. So it's like Groupon meets Meetup now. And we went back to all of our advisors that we had met with and that helped create all of these projections, and we're ready to go now. And in that moment, really felt like, well, I guess this is it, right? But looking at the process and the work that we've done since then, I think we have something way better. And so it's really taking a moment like that, and it's how you react. Everything is, your response. And if you continue looking at it as an opportunity to solve a problem, that's when businesses become successful.
Mm-hmm.
So about a year and a half ago, I was approached by a huge company. If you think of your top 3 home companies, they're one of the top 3. And they wanted to bring our best-selling product into all of their stores. It was a huge meeting. I mean, I went into that meeting, my heart was like, boop, 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 boop. And because I knew that our margins can support their model, right? But I went in there and I told them, I would love this. This would be great. Here's what it would be. And my hand's like shaking. And the lady looks at the numbers, says, okay. This was in the middle of America having another reckoning with Black-owned, with Black Lives Matter, there was a lot of talk of supporting Black businesses. And in the meeting, I got the feeling that whatever I said was going to be okay, because I checked a lot of boxes. And I'm like, okay, cool. What they needed would, how do I say it? I would have to change my business back home rapidly in order to be able to get them what they needed. And our products that we make are slow because they're made by hand. The infrastructure I've built back home is strong, but you can't just bring in new artisans. I can't just bring in 1,000 artisans and we just go. But I said, okay, and I said yes, and I signed the contract, and we're off to the races. About 2 months into production, we had another meeting where they said that they had to pull out of the contract because of circumstances outside of their control. I was devastated. I had shifted my entire business to kind of meet this need and to meet their deadline, and I was devastated. I couldn't believe that I did that. I couldn't believe that they're now pulling out. What am I going to do with all of these artists? Like, what am I going to do? Well, I just told the truth. I told my artists. I told everybody I had to get small again. And just as I did that, they came back. They came back and said, oh, we're ready to talk again. And I made a mistake. And I said, no. And I say that this was a mistake because looking back now, a year and a half later, I think it was the right decision, but I made that mistake emotionally. I made a very emotional mistake, and it wasn't emotional. They had boxes that they had to check. I had artists now who really were depending on me that I had to let go. And we could have I could have went in there and renegotiated. We could have came to a smaller, maybe we don't do a nationwide, maybe we do a couple of stores. Maybe we figure out something that then we can sustainably grow with them and they can sustainably grow with us. But I made an emotional decision that had nothing to do with me. My life didn't change. I just went back to la 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 la. But there were hundreds of people whose lives changed because I made an emotional decision. And it took me a really long time to forgive myself for that emotional decision, because why? There was no reason for me to make an emotional decision. So then I beat myself up and beat myself up and beat myself up for making an emotional decision, because I thought they were just, juggling me around. Well, the truth is I can't go back and change it, right? I can't go back and tell them, hey, let's do this. I can't do anything about it. All I can do is from this moment on, from that moment on, continue building what I'm building. One of my favorite African proverbs goes, little by little, the bird builds its nest. Now, they were giving me a house, but I had a really beautiful nest. And I continue to add to it. And so forgiving myself for saying no to the house, but also continuing to build my nest, is something that I've had to reckon with and really just forgive myself and move forward. But that was a hard one.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Any audience questions? Right back there, awesome.
Hey, what's up, y'all? First of all, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing all the details, all the workaholic, ideas and the balance. It's really inspirational to see on mine. I'm especially excited to see this video footage later in my times of needing some inspiration. So thanks for that, first of all. In my mind, there seems to be two different modes that I prefer or try to get in. One is grit. I had this plan, and no matter what it takes, I'm going to make this happen. And the other one is flexibility, which is, hey, maybe I should consider this house, or I should leverage this house, metaphorically speaking, the house for, maybe I should leverage the opportunity to get this house to go, anybody have a better house that they can build me, or, whatever that came in. This is for anybody on the panel. The question is mostly, is this what you envisioned? Your current life that you're living, are you on that path? Have you been more in the grit or the, flexible mode? Do you, maybe you're better at one and then you kind of outsource the other to your friend that you really trust, or your partner, or your investor, or whatever it is. Just curious to know if this is part of your thought process, and if you figured it out yet, because I'm all ears.
My answer is yes. This is the life that I want to live. Is it easy? No. Is it fulfilling? Yes. And I think I've approached my life in general and my experience with business as flexible. There are times when I stay up until midnight because it doesn't happen unless I stay up until midnight. And there are times when I take a random Friday off because I want to. And those are rare, but it happens occasionally. But also with the product, right? Like our first iteration, we were like, we're going to make people connect within the first 20 minutes of connection online. And if they miss that chance, then they don't get to connect virtually anymore. And, collected user feedback, and nobody thought that was a good idea. And so we iterated. And just like, any startup, what we have now was not what we originally envisioned. And just like my life, what I have now was really not what I originally envisioned either. But it is, I love it, and I, again, have to circle back the balance. I have to, continually ask myself, am I living out what at the core of my mission? Am I connecting people? Am I being connected with people? Surrounding myself with people who bring me life and bring me joy, and, it's a consistent, everything is a consistent evaluation of, I'm here, is this where I want to be? What can I do to get here, or so on. To it?
Is it what I expected? Yes, in a broader perspective. On a day-to-day basis, sometimes not. It's an interesting question on the kind of grit versus flexibility. How often, how bloody does the forehead need to get before you realize you could walk around the wall rather than trying to go through it, right? And I don't know that there's one right answer. I'd say, for me, that's why I keep a lot of people, a lot of advisors up to speed on what's going on, because when you're in that, I'm going to beat my head through that wall, I'm going through the brick wall, you've got to have somebody else that you can talk to and say, okay, is it bloody now? Should I go around now? And so it doesn't always have to be your decision. Ultimately, it's your decision, but the idea doesn't have to be. Keep other people in your circle, keep other thoughts going on, because if there are people that really are up to speed and know what you're going through, and they're wise, and a good advisor, somebody usually out of the group will say, hey, might be time to stop, might be time to step around that wall, right? And you're not on that same path forward, you're on this path. Don't hold yourself responsible for making all that decision without any other input. Get those advisors, get those people you trust. Spouse, it doesn't have to be your traditional advisory board role, but just somebody that it's more important that you trust their advice more than anything else. And maybe they've got some history or experience that you don't have and bring a different perspective.
I think being able to jump and the net will appear, right? Sometimes the net doesn't appear and you just kind of hurt your back. But I find that even when the net doesn't appear and you fall completely on your head, there's so many lessons to be learned there. And really being able to take a step back. I feel like I personally have a very big ego. And being able to lean on people around me to say, you were wrong. Okay, but this, that, these, and those. And really hearing that but, not as an insult to my personality or my character or my intellect, but as a warm welcome and a door opening. And being able to, taking those losses and saying, hey, okay, let's jump again. You know what I mean? But not in a way that's like, daredevil, let's jump again and just kill ourselves. Yeah, exactly. So sorry, yes, we're having So I think I'm with you on that. I'm one of those jump and then, but I'm okay with that. As long as you have a support system that can tell you, that's enough, what did you learn? Or if you can self-regulate, that says, what have you learned now? When we jump again, are we gonna take a parachute? What are we gonna do to make sure that the fall isn't as great? And that's okay. Like I said, I just keep failing and failing and failing. At this point, I have failed at so many things over the last 5 years. But overall, we're a success. So did I fail? Or did I just learn?
Thanks. Is there something you know now that you're glad you didn't know early on? In all of your stories, and thank you for being here, this is
Yeah.
really fascinating. The image of the phoenix comes to mind as the standard bearer for startups, right? There's
Yeah.
always fire and flame out and coming back, right?
I'd say how long it would take to get to this point, right? If somebody had said, we've been at this for 4.5 years, I would have expected to be where we are 2 years ago. So if somebody had said it's going to take 4.5 years, I'd probably prefer not to know that back then. Right? But but it's that tenacity, it is okay to beat your head against the wall for a while because sometimes the bricks give way and you make your way through. It's the time it would take for me. One other strategy, it occurred to me, a question came up earlier, you're charging forward, trying to get through that wall. One of the things that helps me is I kind of play chess in my head a lot. I'm like, okay, I'm going this way, but I know that's not 100%. So I think, okay, as a backup plan, I could go this way, I could go that way. I don't start going that way, but I think through what it's gonna take to do, to go down, to switch paths. And do some quiet behind the scenes work to make that maybe a little bit easier. That's one way to think of it. The other kind of visual analogy is like roulette, right? You don't wanna have all your bets on one number. Spread your bets across the table because you don't know which one's gonna play out. So you've got to balance this tenacity for going hard in that direction, but then also kind of prepare the ground, place other bets quietly. You don't need to tell other people you're doing it, but place those other bets or prepare those other bets in case that one doesn't work, because eventually you will find a thing that you can't find your way through and you're going to have to pivot in a different direction. I don't know what it'll be. If we knew what it was, we'd pivot up front. But having either thought it through and prepared that ground for making that pivot, maybe you prepare 4 alternatives and you only need one, that's fine. But you're going to be better prepared emotionally than when you do make the pivot. You're like, oh, yeah, I've gotten comfortable. This thing might not work out, and I'm going to have to go that way. I don't know. It's a generic advice, but it's a framework that worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think to your question, what I know now that I didn't know then was how much math was going to be involved in my day-to-day life. And I wish I could go back to college and take more courses. There's so much math. The amount of math that I have to look at on a week-to-week, month-to-month, I never thought I would. I hate math, you guys. But you know what's funny? When you really love something, I hate math. I'm so excited every month to get our diagram. I want to know what we did wrong and right. I'm so curious of what worked and what didn't work. And but I didn't. That's one thing I didn't. And I don't know if I would have started if I didn't think it was just going to be arts and crafts forever, because it's really not. The fun part is no longer my part. Now this new part, which I now think is fun, was never something I liked back when I was in college, So that was something that's different that I'm surprisingly enjoying.
So each of you have dealt with much larger companies in your space at a small stage. Looking back at those conversations, what went right and what went wrong, and what would you do differently?
So he and I went to college together. We partied so hard.
It was my fault a lot.
I'd say the importance of you truly believing and you letting other people see that passion. Because when you're an early stage company, whether you're trying to get an investor or a customer, it's a concept. It's not real yet. And, if you've got to let that passion out. I've seen people pitch and it's a perfectly constructed deck and the numbers, which are all assumptions. The numbers that you feel like they're perfect, but everybody you're pitching to, whether it's a customer or an investor, knows it's all assumptions, knows it's not real. At the core, what's going to make it real, what's going to allow you to will something into existence, because as founders, actually I had somebody pull me aside and say, wow, you just willed this into existence. I thought it was a silly statement until I reflected. I'm like, no, actually that's what we do as founders. We will something into existence. It doesn't exist other than in a concept in your mind, and you make it real. But if that's what you understand you're doing, it's all about you and your passion, and if you've got that passion and you let it out, people are going to see it. That's what early stage investors are looking for. That's what big companies looking to do business with little companies is. Like, you're all in. You truly believe this. You have a background that you could probably be successful, but you've got to show that passion, because that's what's going to carry you through. And that's what's going to make you successful.
I'll just add, I think it really has to be that you have to do something to stand out and be different. I mean, differentiator is the word to say, right? But it has to be innovative, and it has to be genuine. And you're never going to go to bat against a big player if it is an iteration of something they've already tried, probably, or, something that's just like a branch of something that they're already doing. And so it really has to be novel and changing the way, in our case, people experience an online dating world.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for the panel, for your time. I guess I just have one question for early stage founders. Like, what is your advice for raising money in the bear market?
Yeah.
What's your advice for early stage founders to raise money in a bear market right now?
Everything is about who you know and who they know and connections. If you want to get in front of somebody, you need to figure out who they know that knows them that knows them. It is all about connections in the market. And if you're raising money, for us, we're in a really saturated industry, so we've went through Crunchbase and looked at who are the early stage investors in Dig, the dog dating app, and Coffee Meets Bagel and all these other tiny niche markets. We went to go find those people and ask them, why did you invest in this company that was also entering a saturated market with a niche idea, and find out those answers and then get in front of those people.
I also think realistically it's going to be a very hard time to raise money from now probably in the next 2 years, right? If everything they're saying is going to happen economically. So I wonder, and I actually wondered this outside of the economy, of when do you need to raise money? Just that, like when do you actually need to raise money? Because I think in the startup community, there is this glorification of raising money. There's also, getting your business to 1 and 2 is a goal, but actually also raising from 1 and 2 is a goal. There's something really beautiful about being able to say, I raised money and I raised this much from this group. And I wonder, every business is different, obviously, but I wonder what could be done in the next 12 months without any sort of outside capital that can then show an investor 12 months from now that through a bear market, we were able to build this. And where would your valuation be at that point versus this point, where everybody's kind of clutching their purses because we don't know what's going to happen next year?
I can give a real example of that exact thing that you just said, is that we are going to do a pre-sale of our partner business subscription. So we don't have that component of that feature built out into our app yet, but we're going to do a pre-sale and go into these markets that are our 5 initial target markets and say, this is the value that we can bring. This is the discount that we're going to give you if you come on before we have the product to market. But when we go, if let's say we get 500 partner businesses through those sales, and we go to an investor a year later when the economy might be looking better, that's traction now, and that's validation, and that's a great, the concept of that is like, what can you do that's going to continue to add traction and validity to your concept if there's no capital in front of you?
It's make sure you can tell an authentic story of you've got skin in the game, right? I hate that term personally, but y'all know, you've heard it too, right? If you're asking for money in hard times, you've got to convince them that you really have squeezed every other opportunity, self-funding, family funding. Have that conversation, right? Because a lot of times they're going to say, well, go use your own money, find family money. You usually should, and I would agree with that in these times. But if you've gone through that, then talk about that and say, this is what we need. Also, look, we're unusual. Our timelines are very long. By the time we get, a route done, it's 4 years later and we're past whatever this is. But maybe there's a bit of wisdom in that. You know, if people are investing now, they're looking to exit, depending on whether you're going VCPE and for 3 to 5 years from now. We'll be on the other side of whatever is coming. So talk about what it's going to look like, not 12 months from now, but 36 months from now. Because the smart money knows their job is to deploy money. And if they don't deploy money, you've heard the dry powder. I mean, it's just building up. It's continuing to build up. What's going on economically is not changing formation of capital. It's continuing to grow, and it's actually growing at increasing rates. Have some confidence that, yeah, it's hard times, but these people still need to be deploying money. Because your fund managers don't make money. Their job is to spend the money and invest it in good times and bad. So don't get too down that, look, we're trying to raise money in a negative environment. The person, the man or woman in front of you, their job is to deploy money. And if they don't deploy it this year, they're going to have to deploy twice as much next year, which means they're going to have to do higher risk stuff next year. So I'd say hold on to that thought, use it as some level of confidence that you can get deals done. But you do, I would say look longer term and convince them that you really do need the money from them and you've kind of squeezed all the other blood out of the turnip elsewhere.
Well, awesome. How about a huge round of applause for our panelists?